So I will call the meeting to order. And the second item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes or comments? Okay. Do we need a motion?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from December 14th. Does anyone have any comments or concerns about?
A slight comment. Page 5, item 4, commission discussion and decision. There's some nights when you wish you had a do-over. So I just wanted to, I went to not correct, but because I went over and listened to it. So it reads now, Jay Driscoll agreed and added the university ought to have flexibility to do what it wanted at so central a location on campus. And as usual, our minute maker did a super job. That's what I said. But I also added in there, I caught myself and said, well, it can't do everything it wanted. So I just think it's a small item for the record. In the future, if I could change it to the university ought to have flexibility in what it wants to do, given the central location. And I listened to myself and that's what I said. So, but I had another do-over from that night, but that's not right now. Thank you.
Well, that one sounds like it's capturing the essence of what you said. Does anybody have any? Okay. Anything else about the minutes? John, was your other do-over about the minutes?
No.
Okay. So then I'll entertain an motion.
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay. Next is citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anyone in our audience who would like to make a comment on something not on the agenda? Floor is open, and seeing that there are nobody's rushing, we will close the citizens' comments section and move on to new business. Excuse me. The first item of new business on the agenda is EC 2024-01, an application by Chastity Bergstresser for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage at 637B Waddell Street, tax map 35-1-1, owned by H&C Rental Incorporated. Can we have a staff report?
Certainly. We have the request for a projecting sign and 2 window signs for the Lexington, Virginia operation, and it is up in that parcel that is shared with Kenny's as you turn off of Waddell Street and head up the hill. It is in the C2 zoning district, which is also the entrance corridor. The applicant is leasing a portion of an existing commercial building for a tanning salon, and the installed signs were done without a permit. If you look over at the second page, you see that they're sort of in the L portion of the building, and there's an entrance door there sort of in the middle of your photograph. There is a hanging sign already hung, and each of the 2 windows has window signage in it. There is a slight issue with the window signs, not with the projecting sign. And for the window sign, just as an example, where there is only 6 square feet allowed as a maximum, and one of those window signs is 6 square feet and the other one is 7.5. The applicant chose not to make the adjustments in the application that's submitted with this, but there is the option of either deleting one of the signs or making the sign smaller, and the applicant indicated that she would cut the top off of the sunburst portion to make the sign smaller. So we also, if you go forward with this, we also amended the motion a little bit to say that the sign meeting zoning requirements. So that's a little bit different than what you normally see, to address the fact that the window signs as currently installed are slightly above the maximum allowed square footage. As with all of entrance corridor regulations, we have provided you with the sign regulations and then also specifically with the entrance corridor use and design standards. And that's on the top of page 11. Again, there's not terribly much in there for detail, but we provide that for each entrance corridor. Happy to answer any questions.
Are those two windows the same size?
Window signs or the windows?
The window, I'm not sure if I'm following. There's two windows and in both windows, she put that logo, but she can only have it in the one window.
It says the number is not the issue. It's the 6 square feet total. So you can have two, three
Oh.
square foot signs or 1 6-foot square sign, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's her choice on how to comply, but yes, there has to be a reduction in the window signage, either by removing one of the signs completely or reducing both of them so that they reduce to a point where the total of the window sign does not exceed 6 square feet.
Oh, okay. So she could just take one of the signs out. What, but her preference was not to do that. It was to take the sunburst off instead?
And is she talking about taking the burst off of both of them?
You would have to in order to meet the 6 square feet.
And would it then meet the 6 square foot?
She believes so. I might have to do some measuring, but yes, she believes that it could.
Is there an issue with the hanging sign?
No, that meets the sign requirements, size and type. Applicant will not be here as well. Forgot to mention that.
It'd be nice if the property owners who have, this is not their first rodeo on signs, would notify their tenants or let them know ahead of time before they. But it's not really our area, just, just to give them
comment.
notice down.
One comment in that regard, the business owner had a business downtown and was aware of historic district COA requirements and therefore sign requirements and should have also expected the same, at least to get a sign permit or inquire about it.
Right. Yeah, good point.
And we did a sign here previously in this building.
Yeah.
for
That's
the-
how your city planner found these signs was
Right.
because of the other sign.
Right. Any other questions?
So Arnie, if we gave the owner the option, the business owner the option to do either one, then they would be in compliance with zoning. In other words, remove a sign or reduce them.
And that if you're okay with the design, let's say we just have to address the size issue, and that's why the motion says to approve or deny entrance corridor for a projecting sign and window signage meeting zoning requirements to be located at that address. So then you're allowing the owner, not the owner of the property, but the business owner to make that choice. If you have a preference, you can actually make that preference in the motion by saying you have to delete one sign completely or not. So it's up to you on how you would like to handle that. I think I'm hearing though that there's not an issue with the design of the signs or the color or, okay.
And the the business owner's preference is to just take away the sunburst.
Correct.
Okay.
And on that same point for clarification, I think you said cut the top of the sunburst off, but we mean the removal of the sunburst in its entirety from the image.
It's integrated somewhat, so
Yeah,
we
we
delete
took it.
most of it.
When you said it, I imagined just lopping the top off of it. And I don't know if that falls within our purview, but that doesn't sound great. Lopping the top of the sunburst off.
Mhm.
Does
So
such a consideration fall within our purview?
you have the option of just saying, we approve it, but it has to meet the size requirements and they make the choice.
Okay.
But if you have a preference, because this is an entrance corner, you have discretion over this item. You could say that you prefer, because of the design, to keep the design whole with the sunburst, and therefore one of the signs has to be removed.
I'm less asking about the inclusion or removal of the sunburst. I'm just imagining, based on the wording the first time, and I'm sure it's too small, we just like part of the top of it being cut off. And so you'd have it sort of, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
I think so. If you
partial
look
sunburst.
If
To
you,
meet the requirements, the whole sunburst should be removed from both of them.
and I'm not, I wish the applicant were here. If you look at the last page of this particular with page number 14. Now, mind you, this is the design, but it's on the hanging sign.
Yeah.
But you can see the sunburst is within the text itself.
Yeah.
So it's easy to lop off the top. It's easy to say to lop off the top, but then you're not really getting rid of each sun ray. Is that the right way? Because it's integrated within the text. So I just don't know how easy it is to delete that without perhaps going and getting a brand new sign made up with vinyl without the sunburst at all.
It's not clear to me why they need to have the same sign on both windows. Did they
I
talk
would agree
about that at all?
wholeheartedly in that location. If you're already at the top of the hill,
Yeah, um. I mean, I like the design of the sign, with the sunburst. I think I think the sign would look sort of odd if you take just part of the sunburst off.
Mhm.
Um. And so we can say, keep one sign. And it has to stay within the 6 square foot.
correct. And that's easy enough. I'm not sure which one, if it's the left one, the right one. The applicant has indicated on the application in the window signs, one of them is 36 by 24 and the other one's 36 by 30. So the larger one would have to be deleted. And again, I don't know at this time if that's the one on the left side of the door or if that's the one on the window that's on the right side of the door.
And the 637B gets to stay there regardless, is that
Right,
correct?
that's not included
That's- yeah.
because that's street address
Yep,
and
yep.
it's exempted.
Well,
Are we discussing or
Mm-hmm.
questioning?
We could maybe ask for public comment. if you're ready
do
for
we
that
have any
part.
public comment from our very large audience? No? Okay. So public comment is opened and then closed. So if there's any discussion or a recommendation,
I like the idea of one sign to fit with the integrated design. It actually matches the paint color. of the building.
yeah, yep.
And,
I agree, John. I
Yeah.
think looking at especially the bottom picture where it only shows the one and then she's got the other little hanging sign, I think that's more than enough for the size of that building.
Yeah. Anybody, any,
My only comment was when I went by, I thought that the little hanging sign looked on the diminutive size. That to me was, but again, that's not something we can make a decision about. But anyway,
right, and that's not up for
discussion.
discussion, is that correct? The hanging sign is okay, yeah. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion
Okay.
that we, the owner, remove the window sign to the right of the door.
Even that may be the smaller sign.
Do we just say the larger window sign? Because we know the smaller one meets 6 square feet. And again, I don't know if it's the right one or the
okay.
left
I'm
one.
misunderstanding. I thought, okay, each one then is, only one of them
One of them is,
is legal, so to speak.
right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the left one or the right one. So if you could maybe
Right.
just make the motion that only the window sign meeting the 6 square foot requirement remains.
And then she doesn't have to lop off the rays.
Correct.
Right. That's a nice compromise.
That would, sorry. finish the
Yeah.
motion.
Remember what Arnie just said. Okay, I make a motion that the owner remove the sign that does not meet the requirements of the zoning.
Do we have a second?
second,
And all in favor?
Wait, can we have some
Oh,
discussion?
Discussion, sure.
Yeah, I guess my only concern, I sort of like the motion where it's open-ended and she makes the decision, even though I agree on the sunburst, it
yeah,
would probably look weird if she just cuts it off. Because I think the other window is actually more visible and the owner may decide well, okay, if I have to leave one, I'd rather do the other, and I'd rather give her that flexibility than her having to come back. Does that make sense?
So did we, I thought we,
But I thought that would not, the larger one was the one that wouldn't.
Well, she could do two things. She could either put one the same size as the other. If we say you can have the sign, that design within regulation. So then she at least has the option of saying, well, I really prefer that window. I could put, is that right? If we made that motion, she could say, if she really wants that other window that's a little more visible, saying, I'll put a new sign that fits, that meets the requirements.
I think so. You're
Without
giving
coming
her
back.
the option
Yeah,
within the 6 square feet on how to handle it.
right. Saying we want that design, but we like the design, but it has to meet the criteria.
did,
She can figure out.
Mhm.
whether
no,
it's
I
removable.
agree with you, Leslie. Did the motion preclude that, that choice?
Yes, because right now the motion is to remove the
Yeah.
offending
Right.
window sign that is too large. That's the only motion and second it in front of you now.
Yeah, and I know I was the first to raise the issue with the lopping off. But I think I see and share the concern. I think what I'm a little worried about is that if we say you have to remove the larger of the two signs, but we don't know which window it's in, she may then be forced to remove the sign that is actually more visible. Right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So we might inadvertently be constraining the business owner in a way that we wouldn't wish to do so. Am I making sense?
Yes, although she could just cut off parts of those taller sunbursts.
Right. If we allow the flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Do you want to?
I don't know how to say.
Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah.
Does somebody
Right.
want to try it?
Well, let's go ahead and address the motion.
Yeah.
If you prefer Leslie's option, then you actually need to turn down the motion that's on the table and then have a new motion.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion as presented?
Sigma 5 by saying aye.
Mhm.
And opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
And the motion does not carry. Does somebody want to offer another motion?
Leslie, your turn.
Yeah, before I start, are we gonna say that we like that design, or are we giving her the option to lop off the rays?
I think if we don't give her the option to lop off the rays, then in effect, we're saying you have to remove one of them.
Well, she could put back, what I was thinking is, if we feel like it'll look awkward.
Yeah.
Either, though we could say you can fully lop off the rays, or or we approve the design, but the design has to fit within meet our zoning requirements.
So if you did the latter, what you just said.
Yeah.
Then she has the flexibility to,
Completely move the rays, or you're okay with her completely removing them? Okay, then I'll make the motion.
as much as I like to raise, the point is to give her some flexibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And given the location, I think we don't want to.
So, and she's just got to reduce 1.5 square feet on one of the sides. So one of them is 7.5, but needs to be 6. Is that
No, total.
Total.
6. So the 7.5 square foot one would have to be removed completely. And the applicant is indicating that to be able to meet the 6 square foot total, she can lop off the rays. And she thinks she can meet the 6 square
right?
foot total.
That's what I had originally understood. Yeah. That's going to be a lot of lopping that's my only.
And that's why I'm a little bit deficient, because the application doesn't give me enough dimensions to be able to confirm whether or not lopping is sufficient.
I mean, I guess I still am on the side of wanting her to have some discretion.
Shall we do what we've done with the other two
I was
signs
just
that
gonna
have come
say,
up?
should we table this and let
And let her,
her, either come up and talk to us at the next meeting, or certainly give us an idea of what she would like to do with a picture.
The good thing about entrance corridor COAs don't have to be advertised, and we're not hung up with any advertisement in the paper, so there is some flexibility. I don't recall at this point because I believe she said she's at a basketball game for one of her children, and I don't know if that's gonna happen again in 2 Thursdays. So it might be a little bit longer if you're okay with that.
The other thing that would be helpful, I think, Arnie, would be, for her to give you those, dimensions once it's adjusted. And then a little further down on page 2 there, for whatever reason, it says here, will the sign be illuminated? Yes was checked. And,
So,
that's not indicated on her page 2.
no, that's true. I didn't catch that.
So that might have to be remedied anyway.
There's no current illumination
Oh,
out there
yeah.
except for the security lighting.
Anyway, so clarification.
Yeah, and I would indicate to her that we agree with your recommendation that the sign needs to comply with the size. So however she wants to address that.
Yeah.
So is there going to be a motion for deferral
Yes.
to whenever the applicant is available to come back and answer questions?
All right.
She doesn't
Somebody wanna
have
make-
to be here. She could,
Right. She doesn't necessarily.
you clarify the issues via yourself.
So I'll move to defer the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness, application EC COA 2024-01 until the applicant can provide a firm design and more information.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, moving on to B, EC 2023-06, an application by James Larner for a certificate of appropriateness for exterior improvements at 449 and 453 East Nelson Street and new signage at 449 East Nelson Street, tax map 30-1-9, owned by James Larner. Can we have a staff report?
This is the one that was deferred from your last meeting. There's a new sign being requested and also for exterior improvements at 2 storefronts that it's already been completed. I'm gonna flip over. You've seen, there's the photograph on the page 2 of your report or page 16 of your overall packet shows the front of the building. And the storefront includes the old Ugly Ducks, which now has papered over windows and also the pack and mail. And they painted it with that gray color or the charcoal color and the gray stripe. And they would like to put a sign within that for the pack and mail. But the issue that we had last time is they committed to increasing the width of the stripe. We didn't know if it was being increased above, below, or both. And it turns out it's both. But so there were a couple of questions that needed to be answered and they provided additional information to you. So I'd like to not change the staff report, but just provide a little addendum in the history section. So during the last meeting or in the December 14th meeting, you defer your decision until the applicant can provide a visual representation of the proposed improvements and sign so that could be reviewed. The applicant has since provided a Photoshop photograph of the property showing the expanded light gray stripe and the location of the wall sign on the face of the building. If you flip over to, I guess that's page 27 of your packet, you get an indication that the pack and mail sign will be on the center of the facade or the storefront that is being rented by pack and mail. And then they provided another little, I guess, placeholder for the taqueria once the taqueria comes in. And as best as I could tell is the gray stripe is it being increased both vertically, both up and down.
And is the white sign do we know what that is?
Presumably
The
it-
store is vacant right now. It's probably,
Just a placeholder?
yeah.
There's a restaurant coming, they're building it out now. It's a taqueria. So presumably that's just a placeholder for that sign.
Okay.
We do not have sign details for that yet.
Okay. Is that, do you have anything else on your staff report? So any questions for Arnie?
Yes, just to clarify the new Photoshop version
No, that's it.
is, or not Photoshop, sorry, but just the whatever is is the gray stripe wider?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I'm looking back at the first one.
If you count bricks and you zoom way in, I believe it got
Okay,
both up and down expanded.
thank you. Just,
It would have been nicer if it would have been a little wider stripe, such as the ABC store where that area is wider, but
Okay, we don't have an applicant statement, so I'll open the floor for public comment. And seeing as there is none, I will close the public comment section and open up for commission discussion and recommendations.
I think it looks good.
Recommend we approve it. I don't have no problems with it.
Any concerns about that?
No, I think they did what we asked.
and I took a look-see before the meeting and it- all, the stripe does create some unity, the colors are connected, and then each of the individual storefront signs are so different that there's no way that you could make them. Anyway, so I think, yes, I agree, they did a good job of responding to our
Yeah.
concerns.
All right, do we have a motion?
Want to give us a motion?
I'll read it. I move to approve entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application ECCOA 2023-06 for a wall sign for the Pack and Mail business at 449 East Nelson Street and for exterior improvements at 449 and 453 East Nelson Street as proposed by the applicant.
A second,
I'll second that.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, moving on to section C under new business on the agenda.
Can I just make just an observation? Now, this is the third sign that we've been doing, right? We've done,
Yes.
this is the third one. So maybe for Arnie, the message to people that come to you with signs is that the planning commission's paying more attention to the signs.
there's one coming and we have made that loud and clear
Okay.
to the next one that'll be on your next
Yeah,
agenda.
I mean, to be in touch with you ahead of time, to
There's
set-
been a lot of back and forth knowing that they will probably not be in attendance at your next meeting and they need to really clarify their proposal.
That's good.
Thank you. Any other comments?
That's enough.
So we are going to start with the zoning ordinance amendments 2024-01. This is batch A. Can we have a staff report?
How long would you all like to spend before we get into this? Because I seriously doubt we're gonna get through all of them and there's no pressing need to do that necessarily. So I ask you to budget how much time you would like to spend on this, knowing that we'll probably need 10 minutes or so at the back end for the remaining items on the agenda.
Right. Do we have, say 45 minutes?
Yep.
Does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll limit the discussion to 45 minutes and wrap it
Somebody
up at 6:15.
Somebody will kick me at that time.
And
Some
then
of you have gone
Arnie,
through,
just, sorry, before you begin, I think you did this the last time for us. It was helpful, and you mentioned it in your comments when you forwarded the agenda. So tonight, you're not asking us to go into a debate on the minutia of each one of these, right? Are we going?
I'm asking for you all to thoroughly discuss each item and then tell me which basket to put each item into.
Okay,
So basket or batch A is that batch or basket where fairly little discussion, we'll discuss it. We're trying to come up with is language, if that language is appropriate to go for a public hearing. Some of these, the first one's going to be a great example. The reference is wrong. Yes, change the reference. That goes into basket A. And that with a number of other items will get advertised and we'll do a number of zoning text amendments all at once. Basket B is that basket that will Most likely, well, it has to include cottage housing because that's just going to take a lot more time, similar to what you've just done with ADUs. That's not a quick thing. That's going to take more time. That's basket B. And then as an option, there's always basket C, which is, Arnie, this is ridiculous. Leave it as it is. We don't need to address an amendment at this time. So if you think about those with each and every one of these, basket A, yes, it gets packaged up fairly quick, goes forward, or basket B, no, going to be an individual effort with more discussion over more meetings to work that language out, or basket C, no amendment is needed at this time.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
helpful.
Any questions there? Got, well,
So can you talk about the process just a tiny bit? So are you going to sort of talk about each one of these and then we'll open it up for discussion here? And then we'll vote on should we vote on which basket it goes into?
correct. That's what I'm asking for
Okay.
and you don't even have to vote if it's just a nod of heads, a general agreement, unless you want to take formal votes for each one. In either case, this isn't as though you're deciding on it. It's just what basket it's
Right.
going into at this
Right.
time. And then once we get to the public hearing, you'll do all the formal items.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is just go through sort of the structure of this. We've laid out the issue for each item. And we're just going to use the first one as an example. So dish antennas currently, there's a reference for dish antennas in the use matrix, and that's a little excerpt of the use matrix. So what I've done is laid out the issue, and each of those also sort of a question, so an item to consider there. So should the reference for dish antennas be corrected, as an example, provided you with existing language. I didn't always follow this 100% because sometimes it got a little cumbersome, but provide you existing language and then the staff recommendation. So in this case, I've highlighted in the existing language where the issue is and in the staff recommendation, which is to make that change, because again, it's just a reference, and I've underlined and put in red. So anything that's in italics for the most part is language in the code that exists. Strike through, obviously, deletions means a deletion, and underline means an addition. So if in the example here, where the reference would be changed from a strike through of the number 1 and adding underline number 2 in red because it's new, but I don't know how to do red for strike through. So the one that's stricken through is black as opposed to red, but that's the change.
Mhm.
Striking 1 and adding the number 2 there.
Okay. Any,
And then you discuss it thoroughly.
okay. Shall we discuss it thoroughly?
So thumbs up there, it seems
Oh.
like.
Yes.
So that will get added to basket A or batch
right.
A, which will be the list that goes through all together for a public hearing at some time in the near future. Once we get the whole basket filled up, then we'll do that as a separate item with a number of text amendments all traveling together.
Okay. Item 2, cemeteries allowed in parks and open space zoning district.
Now, this one's going to be a little bit more complicated to lay out the story, so to speak. We currently have our 2 cemeteries, Evergreen and Oak Grove, are zoned parks and open space, so POS. For some reason, parks and open space does not specifically allow cemeteries. So cemetery use is not currently a permitted use anywhere but in the R1 zoning district. So that makes the current older portions or parent parcels of the 2 cemeteries to be non-conforming, which in and of itself is okay. They can't be expanded in the sense that you can't add more uses. So non-conforming uses can continue, no big issue. But do we want to correct that? Because we were fortunate to have the opportunity to add land area to both cemeteries. All 3 additions, because there were 2 smaller lots that got it added to Oak Grove, and 1 larger lot was added to Evergreen. Those happen to be R1 zoning district. So in the R1, cemetery use was allowed. So there's no real issue right now, except our big green splotches are parks and open space, and they're cemeteries, and we don't even allow a cemetery in parks and open space. So the items for you to consider are, should cemeteries be allowed by right in the parks and open space zoning district? Should they be allowed conditionally in the parks and open space zoning district? And then additionally, should cemeteries continue to be a by right use in the R1 zoning district? For what it's worth, my recommendation is that you change the use matrix so that the R1 zoning district no longer allows cemetery as a by right use, because I'm not sure we want
Yeah.
Me having a cemetery in my backyard, you having a cemetery in your backyard, and then allowing it as a by right use in the Parks and Open Space District. This will then require us to rezone the 3 properties that were just added to the 2 cemeteries. And we'll do that, just, we'll be the applicant, the city will be the applicant, and we'll take that through the public hearing process
Okay.
without much issue, I presume.
What did you mean by rezone the present cemeteries and to what? From,
If we, right now, the cemeteries, the larger historic parcels are zoned parks and open space. So if
Right.
we change the use matrix so that cemetery use is only allowed in parks and open space and not in the R1, then we have to address the additions that we just put on, which are R1, which would not allow cemetery use. So we purchase property and then we can't use it. So we needed to rezone that to parks and open space, which would then allow, because we've changed it, cemeteries would be a by right use in parks and open space.
okay.
Was it sort of legal non-conforming, but anyway, that's fine to rezone it. And this would apply to both private and public cemeteries.
Mhm.
In the parks and open space right now, does it, okay, I guess that's a
I
question.
think private is separate. That's a good question. I think there's a,
Well, no, but we could, I mean,
Really?
unless it does specify.
you do
separate.
have cemetery private in the miscellaneous section of the use matrix, and the private cemetery is only a conditional use in RLC. And please don't ask me why.
Mm.
Don't know the answer off the top of my head, but there is a distinction between
Okay,
private
so there's a
cemetery and
distinction.
public cemetery.
So we're only talking about city-owned cemeteries. Yeah, so it should be parks. and
So
open space.
in R1, in the R1 district where you can have a cemetery, is that not a private cemetery? So you can have a public cemetery in R1.
Correct.
This is a very, okay,
And I can't
that's an
explain,
unusual.
and I don't know if it was, we did such a huge update. I shouldn't always say just because we did a huge update and that's the reason that we didn't catch something, but somehow we ended up with Parks and Open Space not having it as a by right use, and it is in R1. I can't explain it. And then also I forgot that I think I gave you what was previous language, did I not? Prior to the update in 2017, cemeteries were conditional use in Parks and Open Space.
Mhm.
And a little bit further detail there, if you look at our zoning map, all of the parks and open space land is actually zoned by the city, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 of the golf holes on this, the Lexington Country Club.
What do you mean?
A smaller portion, not all of the Lexington Country Club golf course is in the city, about 3 or 4 of the golf holes. So if you're going to go make a round of 18, you're only in the city for a portion of your trip.
Yeah.
And that is the only parks and open space land that is actually privately owned, just to make the distinction. So for the most part, when you're talking about parks and open space, you're talking about city-owned property.
So you're saying prior to a previous change, cemeteries were conditional use in the use matrix for
Parks and open space
parks and
zoning.
open space.
correct.
And do we know why that was changed? Like, is there anything else that we ought to have in mind that's sort of pertinent to that? You know what I mean?
No, I
Something
don't
people
think
were
so.
trying to avoid. Okay, nothing. Yeah. got it.
And I'm not having the recollection of why it necessarily changed. If it was a mistake, and maybe it should have been a parks and open space conditional use to a by right use, and
Yeah.
somehow it ended up by right over in the wrong column.
Mhm.
I really
Okay.
can't explain that.
But it's not that there was some other like likelihood of parks and open space being turned into cemeteries that people wanted to.
Not that,
Prevent
no,
from happening
not that I
or
recall
something.
at
Okay.
all.
But if it's a by right use, then the city could say, well, gosh, that playing field, we don't need that. We really need a cemetery. And they could just do it if it's by right. They don't have to get a conditional use
That's a
permit.
good point. I mean, I can't imagine that the city, mainly because of costs involved in maintaining cemeteries, they're a loser, not a
Yeah.
generator.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that would happen, but it doesn't mean that something couldn't happen in the
Right.
future where there's that need for expansion, even though we're adding to both cemeteries currently. But yes, you could certainly have the option of going forward with not a by right use in parks and open space, but a conditional use.
But a
if you so
conditional use.
choose.
So going back to the way it used to be.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess well, I think that sounds great. Whether we do it by right or conditional, either one's fine with me. But just something to think about, we doesn't have to be decided. So if the city's already bought that property, it's by right as a cemetery. We don't really have to rezone it. It'd be nice to rezone it just to have it uniform, but anyway, something to think about. That really doesn't relate to this discussion, but I'm gonna.
But then in theory, you can expand it. Right now, it has no cemetery lots on it at all
Oh, you can't
and lay them
expand it.
out. And
Okay.
then to even further that, people may have in their mind, it's only for in-ground burial. Well, what happens if we also want to put niches or mausoleums or something else? Is that necessarily an expansion? So I think
Okay.
it's just cleaner if
Right.
we allow it, by right or conditional, but clean up the
Yeah.
zoning district.
Yeah.
So shall we put this in batch A? Is that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And because we have to advertise it, which way would you like it? In other words, in the parks and open space, I think I'm hearing that you're okay with deleting it as a by right use in R1,
Mhm.
but is there a preference? Because it does need to be advertised in such a way. In the parks and open space, would you like it to be a by right use or a conditional use?
So the
A
only cost,
Conditional.
I like
yeah,
conditional.
conditional.
too.
yeah.
conditional?
The only cost of conditional would be that they'd have someone who wanted to build a new cemetery in this type of space would have to come before us and get approval.
And that would apply at this point to parks and open space zoning districts, which are city owned or a little bit for the county or the owner of the golf course, whoever the heck that is. So yes, and there's a little bit obviously more control in that situation.
Seems like a low cost way to retain some control over that. I would favor that.
So I think I counted enough heads that the majority would like it to be a condition, advertised as a conditional use in parks and open space, and the by right use gets deleted in R1
Yes.
and in batch A.
At batch A, right? Okay, item number 3, update the entrance corridor lighting standards to include dark sky requirements.
We have exterior lighting standards were added in the 2017 update. So we have a whole new section, section 15, that I'm going to paraphrase heavily or really summarize in that all exterior lighting fixtures have to be dark sky compliant. We did not update the standards that we have in the entrance corridor. So if you read down to the existing language where it just says lighting should be uniform in style for each project, the lighting should be contained within the site, and light poles shall not exceed 24 feet in height. I think it would be helpful for us so that if we have an entrance corridor applicant and they don't flip all the way over to the lighting standards and they don't realize exterior lights have to be dark sky compliant, I think it would be helpful to add that to the entrance corridor design standards. So should the entrance corridor design standards for lighting reference the dark sky requirements located in Article 15?
And why are you removing the 24 feet?
Oh, I didn't mean to.
Oh, okay, good.
I had that same question.
Oh, no, sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay.
Because no reason. No reason at all. Got happy with the strike through.
So, what are folks thinking? Batch A?
Jay.
1, 2. Yes, okay,
Yes,
so we'll
yep.
put that in batch A. But not
Oh.
striking out number 3.
Can I
Yes.
rephrase that? I just realized why. I don't think I put it in the report at all. The standards in the exterior lighting actually have heights of maximum of 25 feet. So if we struck it 24 feet in the entrance cord, then it would match the 25 feet. And you're not going to be able to tell the difference between 1 foot, between 24 feet and 25 feet on a light pole. So there was actually a reason, I just couldn't remember.
Where'd
So-
you say the 25 feet was?
In the exterior lighting section. So specifically in 420.15.3, which talks about general standards,
Uh-huh.
maximum height, except for athletic fields or performance areas, the height of outdoor lighting, whether mounted on poles, walls, or by other means, shall be no greater than 25 feet above grade.
Oh.
So instead of having a second conflicting statement, you're just saying,
Just make.
refer everybody to the other
Unless
standards.
you're wanting to keep the 24 feet, which is perfectly fine.
Well, I don't mind making it 25. I'm just trying to think, is there any reason? instead of having it in several different places? Is there other standards in that requirement where the 25 feet is that they'll have to reference anyway?
Can't think of any off the top of my
Because
head.
then it might be nice just to change that to 25 feet in case, so you're not having to check several places unless there's a whole checklist of things they already have to look for in the other. Just a suggestion.
So sounds like are we okay with moving this into batch A?
Yes.
Okay.
Then
Moving on.
how would
Was
you,
not determined.
Sorry.
yeah,
You still have
Not
to
yet.
read, yeah.
so number 3, would you like to keep that 24-foot height, or would you like to just strike that so that it matches the 25 feet?
I change it to
Or-
25 feet and leave it.
Yeah.
Change it 25 feet and leave it?
Yes.
That's fine. With me. Anybody else? Good.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
All right, ready to move on to 4?
Now, this one I may have overthought it in the sense that this may be a bucket C, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We have, if you look at the language there for the use matrix, we have definitions and uses for drive-in restaurants, general restaurants, mobile restaurants, small restaurants, and specialty food shop. The specialty food shop is a little bit different, and I'm going to read the definition. The use of land such as a coffee, candy, or ice cream shop where the primary client consumption is off-site with limited seating and the product is limited to one type or line of food service. And this is the important part. And the food preparation is such that all odors must be contained within the establishment and specialized equipment may be required to contain odors. That's not really the important part. Number 2, it does not involve cooking in parentheses, but the application of heat by microwave or the boiling of water for beverages shall not be considered cooking for purposes of this definition. And the last one, no open flame heat source is used. We have, so you can use a microwave, but you couldn't use a convection oven. And there are so many different kitchen appliances now where you have a combination microwave convection oven, or you have
Air
a regular
fryer.
oven and a convection oven. So I was wondering if there was any particular reason not to potentially expand the uses or the types of cooking appliances allowed for a specialty food shop. And again, these are very specialized little item, one line of food service. And the other thing to point out is that they are by right in C1 and C2. So arguing whether or not a convection oven is or isn't allowed in C1 or C2, I think isn't really the issue because everything else is allowed in C1 and C2 as far as restaurants go. But maybe the focus should be on RLC, that sort of transitional zoning district that has some residential uses in it and some commercial uses in it. And it's supposed to be the buffer between single family and downtown proper for the most part, or other commercial areas of town. So I guess I'm asking is, in addition to a microwave oven, should an oven and or a convection oven be allowed in a specialty food shop? Because staff's
And is
opinion,
this is without a stove? Is that
right, no open flame heat source. So
so you could have a stove, you could have a range, but ranges were referred in here. In the second paragraph, it says the technology utilized in microwaves is distinct and can be considered to have less impact on surrounding uses when compared to ranges, flat top grills, and deep fryers. But isn't a range just the thing that you have in your
Got the
kitchen, like a
stovetop
stovetop and
and
an
the
oven. So
I-
you're saying an oven is okay, but not a stovetop.
and we could cut it any particular way. So I'm just wondering if there's that additional types of applications of heat that could be considered for these very limited specialty food shops.
I would say, first of all, it should be conditional in RLC. Because I think that's the only, but otherwise it's fine. And then I do agree. I don't really have a problem with the range.
Or even an air fryer,
Well, yeah, a deep fryer, definitely.
not a deep fryer, but an
Yeah.
air fryer is like a little oven.
And if you have it, then conditional in RLC, then I do think it'll address any issues if people do have with, I know it's come up before in RLC, some people don't like the smell of bread or for whatever reason don't want, though it's supposed to contain all odors within, but I think if we make it conditional, we can kind
I
of
forgot to
address
add the
these.
one part why this came up, is
Oh.
the cupcake shop downtown.
Oh.
So they wanted a convection oven. And I thought to myself as a zoning administrator, well, that's really no different than a microwave so I allowed it. And then I put a note in the zoning files. We better actually take a look to see how we want to consistently handle this going forward.
Mhm.
One way certainly is if you wanted to have that latitude by making it a specialty food shop, a conditional use in RLC, and then potentially opening up more types of appliance use in C1 and C2, I think that would be a good way to handle it. And you would just have to figure out how many. I'm not air fryers and other things, but, I'm not so sure we need to get into all the countertop type appliances because we'll be here forever. But
Mm.
maybe just we're still going to have the number 3, which is no open flame heat source. But do you want to allow a convection oven, a regular oven, or a range, which then gives you cooktop
Surface.
type?
So by eliminating the open flame, that doesn't allow a gas appliance, is that correct?
That is
At all?
correct.
You could still cook on a cooktop.
Electric cooktop. But you're right. If I have an oven and a range that's all gas fed, so I could not use that because that's open flame.
Even not even the top, but even the oven.
The
you
oven.
could.
That's the way I would interpret what we have in number 3.
And,
Yes.
and why would you not want a gas flame? Why would we not an open flame source?
I presume in this definition is just once you get to open flame, you're
Mm-hmm.
providing perhaps more heat, more intense heat. You're having larger impacts with your cooking with open flame.
When are businesses such as this, or any business, when are they required to have exhaust fans?
Certainly with any combustion that occurs with gas or propane. So once you have those materials, they need to be exhausted, fryers, all of that. You want an event for any type of cooking, quite honestly, but I don't know what's in the building code. If that's, I presume the question is what's in the building code, what type of venting is required. It's certainly required for open flame and fryers and that type of thing. But I could not tell you right now if you only have a convection oven or a range that's electric, does that automatically require an exhaust fan or exhaust vent?
Maybe one way to,
Burn things in a regular
Oh, yeah.
oven.
I'm just thinking back to the donut shop request
Mhm.
and how if we kind of tested this proposal against that.
Well, but donuts get deep fried, don't they?
Yeah, but I'm just
But the other part it brought up too was that we really don't allow takeaway anywhere downtown. All these definitions of restaurant is you have to have some seating within the restaurant.
mhm.
So we allow takeaway now with specialty food shops, but do we still want to continue banning takeaway completely? And would this be the place to do it or not really? I guess that's
How are you, Leslie, I don't understand. Takeaway is not allowed.
You mean a solely takeaway?
right.
Oh,
But
solely.
takeaway, right?
Oh, okay.
And that may be how we want to keep, and that probably should be addressed in restaurants rather than specialty food shops,
would
but
think
just
so.
something to keep in mind. that-
Yeah. So do we have thoughts on whether this rises to batch A?
I think there should be some limitations. I mean, we're talking specialty shops of candy, coffee, ice cream, and if we start allowing all of this other stuff, then I think it's no longer a specialty shop.
Well, those items would still remain because that part is not changing. The only thing that would change would be potentially adding not just heat by microwave or the boiling of water, but maybe application of heat by oven, convection oven, or range. So we'll still have the limitation on only one type or line of food service, examples such as coffee, candy, or ice cream shop.
Right, so it's just about heating food, how they're allowed to heat food, not cook food, correct? They're not
Well,
supposed to
I
cook
don't know.
food? I don't
To
know.
me,
Are-
that's
I mean,
cooking it.
why would you need to heat food I mean, coffee, yes, of course, you want hot coffee, but. Okay.
Cupcakes,
What?
yeah.
Oh,
Cupcakes.
cupcakes.
You
Oh.
have to cook them. You
So
aren't
how
just
is she-
heating them.
How are those?
Right, that's what I'm wondering, because
And-
doesn't this say heating as opposed to cooking?
But the cooking is in, depends on how you want to read it.
But and when do you, who decides if you need a hood or not?
Steve does.
Okay,
Building official, sorry.
building official.
Steve,
So,
Building official.
so we would be covered if we allowed, and we can call it cooking or whatever, but you know, what you've listed plus a range, not a deep fryer, and made it conditional use in the RLC. I mean, we'd be covered if it did need a hood. The building inspector would take care of that.
And a hood is a suppression hood, so that is definitely needed when you're cooking with gas or deep frying and all that. And I can only imagine that it's also going to be required to have some sort of vent above, not maybe a full suppression hood. No, sorry, a suppression hood is when it gets so hot that there are detectors just like there are for a sprinkler system, but then instead of water coming out of that hood, there's halon or whatever the actual material is that comes down and puts out the fire. So it's a built-in safety feature because, as you know, restaurants with open flame and fryers and whatnot have a fairly good tendency of burning. But that's on the big commercial side. If we're only talking about a range, there's actually a good example. In the back of Lex
Mercantile?
Mercantile, they had a range and it had the regular vent. So maybe that's the answer right there.
So
How is the cupcake shop cooking? Are they cooking there or are they?
Convection oven.
convection up, they're cooking, but that was with a permit.
Yeah, correct. And I don't know
So,
about the hood. I haven't gone.
Oh, I
in,
don't
so I
know.
don't know
Yeah.
about the.
right, so, but the only thing that it says specialty food shops are not, it does not involve cooking.
That's right.
But then
under
there's
the
the exemption,
definition.
and we would be adding to the list of exempted
Mm.
cooking things.
But
But
it,
yeah,
lit-
but your point is, are we allowing more things?
are we allowing
cooking
them to
that we
actually cook?
shouldn't be?
I mean,
That's a
which
fair
is to
point.
say, is the cupcake shop actually a restaurant since they're cooking? I mean, if
And they'd be a
it's not
C1
just
by right
reheating.
use, so
Yeah.
it's not reheating, right? I mean, that's what microwave usually says to me is I'm reheating something. I know you can, but it says it does not involve cooking, but the
Right.
application of heat.
That's throwing me off too. And again, I've been here for a long time to continue to say, sorry, I'm new. I need to understand every time, but I have a couple of questions that I'm sure others already know the answer to that should be quick. Like, so how does a business end up how are these categories determined? Like, how do we designate one as a restaurant and as small or large or as a specialty food shop? And then can you tell me that first?
typically one or two ways. Either they know to call me and
Yeah.
they tell me what they want to do. I look through
Right.
the zoning and say, yeah, you're a restaurant general, you're a restaurant mobile, you're a specialty food shop.
Right.
Try to figure out. And sometimes they're somewhere in between too. And we've had those instances here where we've had to try to figure out whether or not they're educational or whether or not they're
Right.
something else. So, or the other thing that
But the
happens.
definition, you look at the definition's pretty specific
Right.
on, you have to meet this criteria.
The other way is if they just put in their business license application with the Commissioner of Revenue's office. The Commissioner of Revenue's office puts together what we call a pink sheet, but it's a zoning approval form, sends it up to my office with a short description of what the business license or what the operation will be. I give them a call because there's two of us in our department that have to sign off on that. One is me for the use. So I call them up. What's the use? Oh, that's this. Okay. That's allowed by right or conditional in this zoning district. So you either got it right or you got it wrong.
Right.
And then the second sign off is with our building official.
And so then is it important and if so, why is it important that we prohibit something called cooking? Especially if the boundaries around cooking seem fairly permeable, like bendy. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think
why,
it's-
why do we need to keep the part about prohibition of cooking there? Or is, and I'm not expressing skepticism. I want to educate myself.
Yeah.
I think it's just, we have definitions for restaurants, general, mobile, small, and then we have this ice cream shop. Not really
Right.
cooking in an ice cream shop. So how do you handle that separately from a full-blown restaurant?
Yeah.
And then you also deal a little bit with the takeaway, like mostly by walkout and not by table service. So you address that a little bit there. But I think it's for the ice cream shops or in the lower level, a coffee shop, the lower level.
Yeah.
That don't really utilize as much cooking. So but it's a valid point. How bendy do we want to be on the cooking part?
But I've never been in the back of the ice cream shop, but do they not have a stovetop? Because when I've made ice cream, you have to first cook the stuff and then you freeze it. Do they not
I
do?
don't even know if they make it there. I don't know the answer to that.
But yeah, I think almost any kind of food, I agree. You might as well call it cooking, but limit cooking to these few things. Cause I think even ice cream, candy shop definitely cooks.
Well, they certainly cook the waffles, the waffle cones.
Yeah, right.
So perhaps the issue is that it should, the cooking should be limited to the specialty items that they sell. Right? If it, I mean, because we don't want them to cook.
Expand beyond.
Yeah, we don't want them to expand beyond the, being a cupcake shop or a ice cream shop. But surely they should, I mean, it seems ridiculous. If they're cooking those cupcakes in the store, then that is cooking.
So then that begs the question, is this even needed? In other words, the addressing and trying to be bendy and add more appliances for cooking to something that really doesn't allow cooking. Is this discussion even needed?
I think we definitely need this because like I said, we don't allow takeaway. And
Mhm.
these type of
only option.
places are, yeah, right.
Well, I mean,
are-
the change that we're discussing needed. I think we still really need to keep specialty food if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, but we need the change too, because I think the cupcake shop that type of business is
the-
appropriate downtown.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think some of these others were saying don't cook, probably do cook like the candy shop used
Right.
to. And
Right.
Yeah,
And so maybe we need to change part of number 2. The line that says it does not involve cooking and have that reflect cooking can only be of the items, the specialty items that they're selling
in those type of applications.
in those types of applications. Yeah.
But would that not automatically be because the definition says the use of land such as no, that's just listing such as. So yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to move this into batch A?
I think we've got it solved pretty much. The only other thing I will ask on this, so for a specialty food shop, are we? So you brought up about whether is it more about the product or is it about the method of making it? Because are we okay with, we have Greek foods, but you can only use these application of cooking. Would we consider that a specialty shop? Or are we saying it's more about specialty shop is you only make cupcakes, you can't be as broad as Greek food. And I only bring that up, kind of answering your question
Mhm.
or in response to your question.
Well, it does seem pretty clear here. Coffee, candy, ice cream. So, I mean, if it's Greek food, it's a restaurant.
No, to me, I think it's more about the application, about the application, but maybe not about, you can only use these cooking methods. But is that not the case?
Can we,
Are we more?
sorry, I mean, Leslie's point's a good one, because someone may come in and say that that's a specialty. So what are we really trying to either encourage and or prevent
Right.
here? That's what I'm trying to understand.
That's what I'm trying to get at, yeah.
And is it one, if Arnie has said that in C1 and C2, we're not really debating there. So this is in a very small area of the RLC. So again, it goes back to what are we trying to either encourage or prevent? Is it odors? Is it crowded spaces where, you know, that was the question with the donut shop? It was both, actually. So I'm just trying to think that one through a little bit. The implication of one or the other.
The odors is already taken care of because number one talks about containing the odors. And to answer the question, I think it's about flexibility, just potentially adding some flexibility to these specialty food shops with a slightly wider array of choice for their non-cooking appliance.
Yeah.
And we want to
I
encourage.
think we need to leave
specialties.
the word cooking in there because that can involve,
You mean
Allowing
oh, no, not, right now it says cooking is not allowed.
Mhm.
But then it
But
gives some
somehow we
exceptions.
have to phrase it so that just microwaving, we don't consider that cooking, I guess. You know, I mean,
If it-
certainly we want to allow some appliances. But it's,
I'll offer this. If you expand by a couple appliances, what's allowed here and keep it with the cooking and it's the application of heat, it's going to be cooking.
Mhm.
And if you're okay with that and you make it a conditional use in the RLC zoning district, I think you've addressed all of the issues because when you get to the conditional use permit and they're proposing to use a range and you say no in that location because of these instances, the range isn't, you can only use the microwave. You have the ability in the conditional use permit to put the conditions in as needed.
This is what I think I was understanding is I too am trying to figure out like how does this actually shape behavior? Like, so do I understand correctly that what we're really discussing is the definition of a specialty food shop? We're basically deciding how much flexibility around something we might call cooking is allowed in that definition.
yeah.
Right.
think so.
And so then I'm asking to myself, why does that matter? And I think I'm understanding that the reason that difference matters right now is a small restaurant is conditional use in one area, right? But a specialty food shop is by right. So like that's the like actionable difference, right? Because if you broaden the definition, something that might be a small, what else makes a small restaurant different from a
Specialty food.
specialty food shop? Does my question make sense?
Yes, and I can find it, but the definition of small restaurant is less than 2,000 square feet, but you get to do all the cooking. There's no limitations on line of food
Yeah.
to one line. So it's everything you think of as a restaurant is just 2,000 square feet or less.
Right.
And you have to have some dining in the
Got it.
Correct.
facility.
There's, yeah, and almost no other place other than specialty food. All the other definitions have a requirement for being largely table service.
Got it. And so one of the things that's been suggested here is that we could also change specialty food shop to conditional use there to match small. And so everything else that's in my mind that's about cooking, like safety stuff, there's other regulations that address all that and somebody's looking at that. So this is really the only consequence of a shift in definition that I could see. Is that right?
Correct. I believe so, because again, it's by right in C1, C2.
Yeah.
In those two zoning districts, you can do all the other restaurants.
Yeah.
So I don't really think the impact of what we're doing has an impact in C1 and C2,
Yeah.
except for maybe a little bit on the takeaway portion of it. But if you make it a conditional use in RLC and you have that latitude, even if you expanded the number of appliances allowed for a specialty restaurant, I think that provides you with the safety of when you're going through the conditional use permit, you can potentially further limit in the RLC.
That makes complete sense to me.
That's the easiest, I think, and most clear.
Okay, so then we're talking about making it conditional in RLC.
Yeah.
And adding these other forms.
Yeah.
Of
Right now it's
heating.
proposed for oven and convection oven. Do you also want to add range there? I heard range earlier.
I'm fine with range, especially if it's no open flame.
Exactly.
You can also, when we advertise, it's another point to make. When we advertise, if we advertise it this way and then you could go through the public hearing process and you hear no range, then you just through
Yeah.
your recommendation, you say no range. And you just add the other two. So there's still, you're just setting something up now for advertisement. When you get to the public hearing process, you still have the ability to make the changes.
And we could, if we wished at that time, but without having to litigate all that right now, even discuss like moving away from cooking as a definitional feature.
You can certainly still get into that if you would like.
Yeah.
What I think I'm
It's just,
hearing
there's a
just
point.
overall,
Yeah, okay, yeah,
it seems to be everybody is okay with expanding
100%.
cooking and again, cooking to allow also the ovens, convection ovens and ranges, as long as there's also an inclusion of a conditional use
Yeah.
being
Mhm.
the change made from by right to conditional in RLC.
Mhm.
Yes.
Is that, are we good?
It's fine with me,
Nod,
yeah.
yeah. And
So,
And to
so
your
rather
point,
than,
John-
yeah, and in item number 2 there under the definition, specialty foods can have
Oh, that's right.
microwave oven, convection oven. Period.
So somehow we have to tie it to only the types of food. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that way they will know that they can't have a deep fryer. Specialty food shops, you know, can utilize an oven, convection oven and a microwave
We're talking about maybe a range too.
and maybe, and sure, put that in there. I mean, then somebody wants us to take that out.
Is that suggestion in substitution for what's in number 2?
It looks like that's what's written. We just add range.
Add-
That whole
adding-
thing
it-
where it says does not involve cooking to me is just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it just.
Yeah. So you're saying what you just listed would be a complete substitution for what's in number 2, not in addition to it, but just a substitution.
That whole thing where it says does not involve cooking, I don't think that applies.
Is everybody okay with that?
Well, just call. I think Shannon said it before. What'd you say? Cooking, only allow cooking with the application of heat by microwave, oven, range, and boiling water.
And also limiting to the line of food,
Specialty line.
specialty line of food.
Yeah, now, so is that necessary to say? Like for instance, the ice cream shop, I don't. They still sell candy? They used to sell candy. That, I haven't,
That I'm aware of.
they don't,
I don't know if they
still do.
um. The cupcake shop sells coffee. Is that a problem? That.
Yeah.
I don't know if that starts to get into a sticky wicket.
Fair.
Because again, I don't want to belabor the point because I know it also can seem silly, like the unending discussion of what cooking means. And as an academic, I'm really wary of, like, we can go there very easily to long terminological debates. But I just am wondering why it's important to keep the cooking thing at all. If like cookingness isn't really definitional to what we're talking about, if it's really about, do you take stuff away or do you sit down? You know what I mean? And especially if the pattern of like uses in the use matrix is going to be identical, right? It's like, what work is the distinction between small restaurant and specialty food shop doing? Because it just seems odd to me to say, like, part of the definition is we don't let you cook, except all the ways that we cook, except like a deep fryer. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Yes,
it
you
makes
are.
sense, right?
And perhaps if we go back to what Mary Stewart was saying, that if we just sort of strike all that and propose it to be stricken and then say specialty food shops can only utilize those 3 or 4 cooking methods and
Yeah.
just leave it that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then it'll be in a strike through an underlined version when it goes for public hearing. So then there's still the opportunity to discuss what's cooking, what's not cooking, and see which way is the better way to address this.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're going to go for batch A, conditional use in RLC, and then a wholesale change to number 2.
Right.
Well done, everyone.
And then oven range and convection oven get added to microwave.
Yes.
Okay.
And boiling water. All right.
I guess you don't even
Oh,
have to
and
put-
It is now
you
six
don't even have to put
15.
boiling water if you allow a microwave and a range.
That's true.
How else will you boil water?
A hot pot.
But you can't have gas, but you can have a range. We already allow the range, so you don't really need boiling water. Right? Right?
Simplify.
I mean, if you have an electric range, what's the difference if it's an electric range or an open flame? I mean, you can
Yeah.
cook in an electric range, the same thing you can cook in a gas range.
Right, but you don't have a flame. I don't know.
Well, what's
I
that?
think- I-
What's getting more
But you still can
restaurant
cook
commercial.
all the same stuff.
Yes.
So why allow a range? Oh, I mean, you're talking about just a specialty shop. That's what they're opening and they're not there for cooking purposes.
Maybe it's just a safety issue.
But heating, it says right here, but for heating, microwave, sure, that's fine. Boiling water, coffee, whatever. But I just start getting into ranges, I think you're into the real cooking.
You need an oven to make cupcakes.
And then you're a restaurant.
So it sounds like uh, with that addendum or no, it sounds like we're okay to advertise this
Yeah.
in batch A, and then we can still tweak it depending on what the public comment is that comes forward. And that's the end of my time.
Yes,
There
there,
it is.
yes, and we are now out of time. So we will store, we got through 4. Yes. We'll pick that up next time and move on to other business. Do we need a
Ask.
Yeah.
Overall, that's the way I'm planning on going forward. Are there any observations, any changes needed for our future discussions beyond 4? Okay, just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with
Yeah.
what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah.
If there's additional information needed, let me know.
I would like a clarification on what's,
Don't say cooking.
no, batch. No, I mean, like you saying batch A, and then there's gonna be what, batch?
Well,
The A, B, C, D? I don't know how many.
batch A and bucket A are the same thing. And I
Okay.
shouldn't have on the table of contents, I shouldn't have put batch A in. So what we're trying to decide is each of these individual items, are they going to go into bucket A, which is going to get advertised, that really doesn't need any more discussion than what we've talked about. We've gotten the language correct for the first 4 items, and that's how it's going to be advertised. And we're going to go to public hearing, and we're going to add some more items as we go through all 15 or 16 or 19, whatever it is, to bucket A or batch A. And then we're going to have a few that are going to go in bucket B, which are going to be things that we can't do immediately. It's going to take a good bit more conversation. Cottage housing, we're going to
Oh,
have
I
a
see.
number of meetings to discuss all the individual components of cottage housing. And depending on how you want to change your entrance corridor or design standards, if you only want to do signage, that could potentially be batch A, bucket A. But if you want to do more than that at this time, then that's likely going to be a bucket B, longer term, more discussion type item. And bucket C is if we ever get to one, you think, no, there's no change needed, then
Okay.
that's file 13 or bucket C.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we need to close this section in any official way?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to other business. Zoning and planning report.
The only thing to report is one to ask you to please complete your financial and real estate disclosures by January 16th. That is particularly important. I know some of you have, thank you. And the rest of you could do that by the 16th. There are some timelines for the city clerk that are fairly important. And if we don't get them in on time, we get dinged on our audit. So that would be helpful if you get those in by the 16th.
And Kate, you sent those to all of us, right? Or one of you did.
Janie,
Janie
did.
did.
you're looking for an email from Janie Hostetler.
Okay,
And it went out midnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it. And thank you for the reminder.
I did get a version of it.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing to mention, there will be an ADU workshop with city council next Wednesday at 7 PM, presumably in this room, but I'm not even sure about that, where it's going to be. But there are basically 2 questions and 1 sort of comment that need to be ironed out or figured out. And there will be a work session to do exactly that with accessory dwelling units.
Can you tell us what they are? The 2, what are the issues that city council?
One was dealing with the connection to utilities, because we had written in there, it does not need separate, the accessory dwelling unit does not need to be separately metered or connected to utilities. And then council member Sigler pointed out that in a totally different chapter that dealt with water and sewers, that it said something to the effect that if there's a separate housekeeping unit under a separate roof, then it has to be metered separately. So we have to figure out what needs to be changed with the metering of utilities.
But
What
that's
are
only
you-
for.
What are you recommending?
I'm going to leave that a little bit up to council, because and the city manager has a particular point on this in that if we allow it to not be metered separately, then you're getting a second unit and you're not having to pay that base charge that everybody else has to pay. So you're in essence potentially getting away with something. But the problem with that is one reason that we recommended that it not be metered, not be required to be metered separately, is it reduces costs, and therefore potentially we might be able to have more of these accessory dwelling units. So there's a balance there. And the public works director had a couple of standards that he had provided us. So I'm not sure he will also have some input on this. And the other one was getting into sort of this spiral of who's living in the main, it's integrating accessory dwelling unit regulations with short-term rentals. Who's the primary resident, who's the primary dwelling, what can be done type A, type B, and the primary and second. So it got sort of convoluted, and we just need to make clear what's allowed as far as we already said only one accessory dwelling unit could be allowed on the property and only one short-term rental. But figuring out the details of if you're the primary resident in the primary dwelling, can you rent out the accessory dwelling? And if so, because you're not living in it, for type A only or type B only. So some details that we had not, I believe we had not gotten to that level of detail when we discussed it. Had more of this overall one only and then went on. And then there was a sort of an ancillary question that I'm not really sure is going to be part of the discussion, is whether or not 4 people should be allowed as opposed to the 2 that planning commission had recommended in the accessory dwelling.
Thank you for elaborating. Appreciate it.
That's all I have for zoning report.
Okay. Any update on the key annual PC milestones? No?
I have one comment. This is my second comment. That on that one, thank you, Kate, for the good summary at the last paragraph there, what I noted on the last meeting of in the last hour, the last meeting of the year when we all wanted to go home. But I owe an apology to Leslie. I said only Pat and I worked on the comprehensive plan, and that was totally wrong.
When you said that.
So I apologize. Leslie was in the thick of it from the very beginning. So I just want to make that clear for the new members, and I'd forgotten that.
Thank you for that clarification. Okie dokie, major project update, no, city council report.
Yeah, so we met last Thursday and council unanimously approved the CUP for the Washington Lee Health Center. And then the work session, Arnie mentioned, that will happen next Wednesday. And then there'll be a public hearing on the proposed dog park on McCorkle Drive at our February 1st meeting. And I hope you got my email. I had my south and north directions mixed up, but
Yeah, we got
I hope you figured out where the proposed dog park is. And that's all I have.
Okay. All right. And seeing as that's it, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor,
Aye.
opposed, and we are adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you, Liam.